In this session, we are going to learn how to launch an AWS EC2 instance and how to deploy a PostgreSQL instance on top of that. So what we are going to do is, since PostgreSQL is one of the most world's famous open source relational database, and the way it is growing up, it has taken the attention of all the cloud service providers. So if you are already there in PostgreSQL in your on-premises environment, there may be two options. Either you go for the managed service like AWS RDS, or if your applications are logged in due to some reasons, then in that case it is good to lift and shift. In that case, whatever databases you have in Postgre in your on-premises environment, you wanted to let the database run in same way in the cloud also. So you have the possibility of using the left and shift. So what we are going to do is we are going to launch an EC2 instance, and on top of that we will deploy uh, the binaries of PostgreSQL 13, and then we will enable the remote connectivity, and then finally we will try to connect it using some GUI tool. So just the basics of like why we wanted to be on the unmanaged service like infrastructure as a service or EC2 instance, so wherein we have to manage all the infrastructure which is related to the management of backups, patching, the patching of the operating system, and the databases and everything we have to take taken care. Where in the managed service we have everything covered up, but because of the n number of reasons, the way it works is in RDS the SSH control has been taken away, and there is a lot of restrictions which has been imposed. And if you wanted to continue with the way you are working in your on-premises environment, you just go and use the database in EC2. So whether we are going to use the EC2 instance or the relational database service, it entirely depends upon the way the application works, and it is all the ask of application only. So what we are going to do is we are going to it is a 5-step process. We are going to launch an EC2 instance using the AWS console, and then we will try to log in it through the putty, and then we are going to configure the remote connection from the local system. Then we will then we will try to connect it using the pgadmin and the command line interface. So let's quickly start up. So I'm already logged into AWS console. I'll say just launch instances. Okay, let me create an instance. So we are going to use the free tier instance. So the best way of learning and practicing the open source relational databases or the NoSQL databases is just go ahead and quickly launch some of the free tier EC2 instance, or from some other cloud service provider, the lightweight virtual machines, and then you can log into that. Or if you have already some local virtual machines, you can use that as well. So I'm going to launch RHEL 8 system, which is in free tier, and that's more than enough. One virtual CPU and 1 GB of RAM. I'll just say next, configure instance details. We are going with all default settings. We are not going to get anything which is non-default. So everything will be default only. And we'll say next, add storage. We are going to use 10 GB of the storage, which is more than sufficient for our testing purpose. And then we will say add tags. We are not going to tag anything. Then we will say configure security settings. So this is very important if you talk about any relational database or any other database. You need to ensure that from where you wanted to access your system and what port. So one of the things we will be doing is we will be accessing the putty session using port number 22, and I'll be using my IP address. So, or you can mention the IP address of your system, so it will pick up that as well. So let us say my IP, and I'll add one more rule. This is for PostgreSQL. Once we install that, I wanted to allow the port of PostgreSQL as well, so that we can access it remotely. Let's go with I will try with those and we'll see how it works. And then we will say review and launch. launch. I have already created a key pair. I'm going to use that. So I do have an access and we'll say launch instances. It is not going to take more than 1 minute or so. Once it is available, then we will see how to connect with that. Still it is in pending state. It is still initializing. So once it is done, it is still initializing. So okay, we have all the details over here. We will go to the networking, or simply we can say action or connect. Still it is getting initialized. We'll try to access it using the putty session, and okay, this is the public DNS which we have to use. And let's go to the putty session. This is the public DNS, and we have to go to authority, and we have to give the location of the key. So it is ec2-user. Those details are already over here. So we are logged in. Now what we are going to do is we have completed the first two step wherein we have logged in. Now one of the things which we should do is we should disable the firewall. So just say, I think I have mentioned the commands over here. Okay. SC status. So as of now it is enabled only. So we are going to disable it. So vi config, and instead of enforcing we will say disabled. I should have used a sudo and just mention disabled. We might have to reboot the instance. Okay, this is done. Well, the next step which we have to do is we have to download and configure the PostgreSQL 13 on Linux EC2 instance. So what you need to do is you need to go to this site, and there you have to select the Linux and the version. If you simply select that, it will show you what all steps you have to do. So these are the steps which you have to follow. I have already copied it on the notepad, so we are going to just run it off. So we have to use sudo to install the requirements of Postgre. It is just 5 steps. We are getting the repository for Postgre. And there are some default modules which are available, so we have to disable those. Just disable them, and then you have to install the PostgreSQL 13 server. It's very fast. Within 5 to 10 minutes, your EC2 instance having PostgreSQL will be up and running. You will be able to access it from your local system either through the command line or through the GUI tool. Whatever you feel is better, it will be ready. You need an internet connection to perform all these steps. This is done. Go to the next step, initialize the database. This is initialization of PostgreSQL 13 server. Then we have to enable it so that after reboot, it should come up. And finally, we have to start the PostgreSQL server. What we will do is, so when you install the Postgre on your system, by default it creates a Postgre operating system user, and it creates a database also, which is Postgre, and there will be a user also, whose name will be Postgre. So let's switch to Postgre OS user, who is going to be the owner, and this is the command line psql, and there is a user also with the name Postgre. We have to change the password. So let's change the password of the user. We have changed it. Now the next step which we are going to do is we are going to verify if we are able to do the remote login on the same server. So it doesn't make sense when you have to say you have to log in on the same server with the IP address. So what we are going to do is so I'm logged in as PSQL. We'll say show config underscore file. So this is your postgresql.conf file. So we have to add the IP address of the system where this is running. So this is running on this. So we are going to add this. So we'll say vi. Okay, I'll show you from here. So by default, Postgre do not allow the remote connection. So anything which is on the local host, it will be allowed. So what we need to do is we need to change this. So we will say vi, and listen address we have to change. Listen address we are going to change, and we are going to make it the IP address of the system. And the IP address or the host name, we'll try with both, which one works fine. Where is the IP? Okay, here it is. There is a caveat using it, but just for testing we are doing this. We have added it, and the next thing which we have to do is we have to add the IP address from where you are going to access this. So there is a file which is called as hpa underscore pg underscore hba.conf, which is Postgre host based authentication. We are going to add that as well, and at the bottom of that we are going to say who all are going to access the system. So these are the virtual IPs of the system from where I'm going to use it. So you need to check out on which system you are going to log in. So it should include those. Okay, so I have added IP addresses. In your case, you have to add the IP address of your local system. This is done. So once this is done, you need to restart the Postgre server. I'll exit from Postgre operating system user, and then I'll say sudo systemctl restart. I haven't given the permission so that Postgre can restart it. So it is done. Now let's check the status. We'll check the status. I need to reboot the server because C Linux might create some problem. And we will try to log in through the host name from the local system. And I need the host name. So the host name is where's the public host name? This is the public host name. We'll mention it over here. So if I simply say psql-u postgre and the password, which we have just set, you will be able to log in. But what if we have to mention the IP address or the host name of the system? It is saying this IP address, it should have been added in postgre hba.conf. So let me check if this is the IP address which is added or not. Uh, okay, I think we need to reboot the system as well, and then it may work. Okay, or we will try rebooting the system from here, and we will say reboot instance 194. Okay, let us reboot the instance. It is getting rebooted, and within a minute this should come up. I should have mentioned the IP address, sorry, the host name. Let us check the status. This is the public host name. We'll say restart the session. ec2-user. We'll say sudo su space -postgre. And let's log in. PSQL, it is not accepting, so that means it is still down. We'll restart it. Sudo systemctl restart, and then we will check the status. I need to use it from this user. So okay, this is done. Let's check the status. This is running. Now let's try to connect it remotely. So it will show us this is my pg admin which is running on local system. So I'll say connect, I'll go to create, and from here I'll mention the IP address. Let's see, public IP address is this one. The only problem will be if the ports are not opened, and in inbound rules that should be opened, or hba.conf that should have that entry. Okay, this is saying 122.80. This is not there in the hba.conf, so we are going to add that entry over here. So it should be in this format. So what we will do is sudo su space minus postgre, and we will add the postgre.hba.conf file. Go to the bottom and add this line. Let's restart the Postgre services. Check the status. Okay, this is working fine. And now try to connect remotely. Okay, we already have the connection. Just say OK. Um, 122. Okay, let me check. If config okay, 122.80.200.23. So let me check. Oh, I missed one over here. So let's switch to Postgre user and added the file. This should work now. The IP address which I mentioned for host base access authentication, it was wrong. Restart the service, check the status, and retry the connection. It shouldn't work now. You are connected. So you are connected remotely. Your database is installed on ec2, and this is what we have done. So just a recap of what we have done is we have launched an ec2 instance, and we are trying to replicate a scenario wherein we have to migrate our application or the workload to ec2 cloud. In our case, this is just an open source relational database which is Postgre, which is still running on the older versions. The newer versions of the RDS support 9.6 onwards till 13, and 14.0 it's in the preview version. And this is what we have done. As a prerequisite, we should have then access to the AWS console. We should have PuTTY and PuTTYGen downloaded on our system. We should have a GUI client. In my case, it is pgadmin. Then we logged into AWS console. We created an EC2 instance with RHEL 8 image, and then we connected it to using the PuTTY. Then we downloaded the PostgreSQL 13 and started it. We enabled the remote connection. And the two important things which were here is PostgreSQL.conf file, wherein you have to remove the local host with the IP address of the server. And then we have a PostgreHBA.conf file, wherein we have to add the IP address of the a destination from where you wanted to connect. So those IPs we have mentioned, then we have checked the status. And one of the thing in PostgreSQL is when we install Postgre or download Postgre using yum, it creates your Postgre OS user, and by default there is a Postgre database also, and Postgre um, uh, database user. Postgre database is also there. Sorry, so there are three Postgre, and Postgre OS user is the owner. And this is how we have done it. If you wanted to transfer the workload from here, it is the things will be almost same the way you work on in on-premises environment. I hope it is going to help.